You'll notice Bill's not here. He's feeling a little under the weather, but I just wanted to get this little video out quickly, talk about the Echoes of Doom leaks, because there's some pretty good stuff here. For those of you who don't know, the next two books coming are going to be Sylvaneth and Skaven, and this is the first box set for that. And we have some new Sylvaneth models, and we have a resculpt of a Skaven hero. We got the Warscrolls for everything on the Skaven side, and we have two from the Sylvaneth side. I think it would be fitting to start with the points first, and then what's in the box itself, and then we can go over the Warscrolls. Let's begin. Alright, we'll start with the Sylvaneth. So we have the Lady of Vines at 340, single unique. Spirit of Dearth through 375. He went up 50 points. I hope he gets more attacks. He's not one of the ones we're going to see today, but he suffered from having 3 attacks and degrading very quickly, going from 6 damage to D6 damage, and that kind of sucks. Alright, and we have Kurnoth Hunters in this box. These are the Bowens specifically, at 255 for 3 of them. You imagine you'll be able to build all 3 of them from that box set, but anyway, yeah, they went up from the bows 30 points, and we'll talk about if that's worth it. That's one of the Warscrolls we're lucky enough to get leaked for us. And the other one is Gossamid Archers 215 for 5. They're interesting. We'll talk about those too. We got the Skaven also. 20 Clanrats for 130 points. It's exactly the same as they were before. Stormvermin 135 for 10. They used to be 110. But we'll talk about those two. I'm excited for these actually. Deathmaster went up 70 points, which we'll talk about that. Yeah, that's a lot for a single hero with 5 wounds, but maybe. And then the Grey Seer and the Screaming Bell changed a lot, and it's at 265, which is exactly where it was at before. Okay, so the Gossamid Archers, they're a 12-inch move, which is insanely fast for this army, of everything being at like 5 inches or teleporting usually. 2 wounds each, 5 up save, 6 bravery. So if you lose one, they're going to immediately start failing a bravery. Or, not failing, but being able to fail a bravery test, which is pretty problematic. Their bow is 12-inch range, 2 shots, 3s, no rend, 1 damage, which pretty stinky on a 215, but we'll read more. Cruel Talons, their melee attack is 2 attacks, 3 spores, no rend, 1 damage. Almost useless. Not, well, you don't want them in melee anyway. They have a 5 up save, and they're 10 wounds for 250 points. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little more. Okay, the champion in this is 1 extra attack on the bow, so you'll have 11 shots total with this unit. They can fly, which flying's pretty good. They have larval shafts, nice. So if you get a 6 to hit, it's D3 mortal wounds on the bows, and then you don't make wounds, the attack sequence ends. So you have 11 shots. On average, you're getting almost 2 of these, so that's 1.5 damage on average. So you're probably going to average a little under 3 mortal wounds with a unit of these. They have like the scattered formation that the dragons and the other flying models, I think the sharks have this too, just because they probably, with their big wingspans, they can't really fit together that well in normal coherency, so they get a little extended, which is nice. And this is the crux on if this unit will see play or not. So if it spits out an Unleash Hell on a 2-up, it can retreat. So this has a little bit of the Lumineth Fox thing, where it's very hard to pin in melee combat, and if your opponent's competent, you only have a 1 in 6 chance of pinning them in combat. Or the Fox, you just get to not be in combat ever. That's pretty frustrating, I think, to play against, but I don't think it's overpowered. I think it's actually a nice tool for the Sylvaneth to have, because you can just put these up, like against a melee army. You can screen, and then they charge you, you fall back. They have multiple things to charge you with. It's a little trickier to pull that off, but they... Actually, no. They move 12, so it would be pretty easy to pull that off. You just put them up there, but then they'll be able to move around it too. But yeah, against melee, I think this is going to be very good. But if anything shoots, they're just dead. Their saves are terrible. If anything like has really good spells, they're probably in trouble. But if they're using their spells to deal with these, you're probably pretty happy about that. Also, if anything has impact hits like ogres, there's a lot of things that do D3 mortal wounds on a 2-up to charge. The 2 D3 mortal wounds won't do too much. Maybe kill one of these, but you can chip away at it. They're not quite as invulnerable to melee as the foxes are, but they're going to play very similarly, and they're going to offer you a similar thing for your army, which I think would be pretty good in Sylvaneth. But I see you bringing one of these, maybe two, but yeah, I think one is probably enough. All right, Kurnoth Hunters. These are a little contentious, but they're still 5-inch move, 5 wounds, which is important because they count as 2 on an objective. Their bravery is up by 1, and their save is up by 1, which is pretty big. So the bravery matter a little bit because at 6, if you lost 1, you'd be forced to make a test. And if you're running MSU of these and one of them was lost in a lot of units, you couldn't obviously inspiring presence all of them. So the fact that you have to lose 2 to force bravery is actually pretty big, especially with the 1 more save. So they used to have a 4-up save, and you could root them in the ground, and they couldn't pile in, but they got a 3-up save in combat. Now it's just a 3-up, so that means you can buff it to a 2-up, which in my mind is a pretty big nerf, or pretty big buff to the unit. Let's see. So their bow stacks went from D3 damage to 2 damage, which honestly, I think even though the average is the same and there's like no chance to spike, it's actually probably better because you'll be able to calculate how much damage you should do on average a little bit more. You're not risking as much. Their melee attacks, I think they got 1 more attack each, and they definitely got +1 to hit and wound there. Which, not great profile, but it's something. The champion, you add 1 to the attack characteristic of their melee weapon, which used to be +1 to hit. I'm of 2 minds of this because frankly that's much worse. But on the other hand, I don't like it when they force you to roll multiple dice for the same unit, especially with such low quality or quantity of attacks. This seems to save a little bit more time. But it just baffles me that this and the Night Hunt, Craven Throne Guard, they just put the bonus on the melee attack. Maybe they just wanted every Huntmaster to be exactly the same champion, but I'm not for that. It doesn't make really much sense for this unit. And like, if you wanted them to be the same, why are you separating them on wars? It doesn't make much sense. But anyway, Envoys of the Everqueen changed drastically, and it was very powerful before. It used to basically be a Wi-Fi extender for your command points on your heroes, which you had some heroes that had pretty strong command abilities that were auras. Like the Tree Lord Ancient used to give you +1 save within 12 inches, and this just extended that. Alara used to have reroll wounds of 1. In 3rd edition, a lot of command points that were on heroes other than gods and monsters that were giant, like the Glotkin, for example, lost their unique command abilities in favor of just using the core ones. So I think it looks like a nerf now that they don't have the extension anymore. But I think when the book comes out, it's not going to be missed because I think those command abilities are going to disappear. And I could see Alariel just getting an aura of that instead of using a command ability. Or maybe a heroic action. I'm not going to even pretend to speculate there, but let's talk about the new rule. So we have Envoys of the Everqueen reworked. So whenever a Sylvaneth hero issues all-out attack or all-out defense command, you can pick 1 friendly Sylvaneth unit within 6 inches of this unit. If you do so, roll a dice. On a 4-up, that unit also receives that command, even if it has already received a command in that phase. I think that's quite strong because there's no range on this. So your hero on the left side of the board could affect your Kurnoths on the right side of the board. Or actually, if you run a bunch of Kurnoths, they'll be everywhere. So, like, allegedly, you could have 3, and you issue all-out defense, and you roll a dice for each Kurnoth. You could get it at least 1 more time pretty easily with that. It's better than 50%, of course. Probably, if with 2 of them, it's 75%, and then, yeah, I don't feel like doing the math in my head. But yeah, if you have multiple of these, you can even spike. Like, what if you get all 4-ups and you have 4 +1 saves on your army? And it looks like we're getting better saves anyway, rather than just relying on Warscroll synergies. So, like, your Kurnoths can be on a 2-up save pretty easily. Or even if your chaff unit's in front of it, you can buff their save for multiple parts of the board on an army that's relied on being spread out and covering ground. So, I don't like that it's unreliable, but I think it's probably fine. I think it's a good ability. I get why it seems weaker than the old ability, but I think the way the addition's going to change, it's not going to matter too much. And then Trample Underfoot stays pretty much the same. Deals about a mortal wound and a half on average at the end of combat. Overall, I think these are buffs to the unit. But at 30 more points than it was, so at 255, I think this is way too much. But on the other hand, like 225 was probably too much also. I don't know. I'm not feeling these yet, but also keep in mind these are just the starter set War Scrolls. And if you remember from the Nighthaunt Arena of Shades, a lot of those changed when the book was out. So for example, Blade Guys Revenants looked terrible, and now in the new book they look like one of the strongest units because of Allegiance abilities, and their points changed in the book too. And then other units, their War Scrolls even changed, like crossbows, or the crossbows went from 5-up save in Arena of Shades to a 4-up. So these aren't going to be the final word, but it's interesting to talk about these now still anyway. All right, let's move on to the Clanrats. This is where it's really exciting for me because I think these are strong. So they used to have a conditional +1 save if they had 10 or more models in the unit. Now they just have +1 save, which applies to the same point as the Kurnoths earlier, where you can then all-out defense them and get them to a 4-up save, where you couldn't before. So that's pretty strong. Their weapon profiles are remarkably similar to what they were before, maybe exactly the same. Yeah, the leader gets +1 extra attack, which is the same. The standard bearer is retreat and charge, which is the same, but also keep in mind it's very powerful on horde units because it lets you reposition them. Which, yeah, that's extremely powerful, especially if like you're piled in weirdly. You can pull back, charge in where you need to be, block what you need to be, and that's great. You also have 2 to run rolls for the musician, which they move 6. They add 2, and then you roll the d6. So they can be pretty fast if you need them. You're probably not wanting to charge these anyway, except for repositioning, like I mentioned earlier. And I think that makes them pretty good, makes them fast. So you'll be doing that a lot. And then they have a new special rule, which is called Seething Swarms. At the end of the Battle Shock phase, you can return D3 slain models to this unit. So it's each player's turn. Your Battle Shock, my Battle Shock. So you get 10 of these over the game. So that's 15 more models in your unit. They're probably not gonna survive till the end of the game because they're not a great save, but that's still a pretty cool rule, especially if it's bolstered by other things in the battle tone. But like 130 points for that is pretty good. And like I know they're not close to. I know zombies are better for their points on the surface, but you can take a priest in Skaven very easily for cheap right now, and you can give it bless and curse. So if you need the defense, you can still give it the 6-up ward that the zombies have. And a 5-up save isn't great, but it's much better than a no save. Also, if you can curse an enemy, you can still do mortal wounds on the 6s, and they have an extra inch on their weapons if you build the spear. So you can actually get more damage. You'd have to choose, but yeah, I think they're good. I'm excited to see how that save really matters for them and what their book has to offer them. Let's talk about Stormvermin now. So they had the same treatment where their conditional shield buff was rolled into their actual profile. So they're a 4-up save now, and then they can go to a 3-up, which is substantial. A 4-up save is much weaker than a 3-up save because it's around the average of the dice. Also, bravery going up 1 point here. I don't think that's going to matter a ton, but it's something still. They got nerfed in their attack profile, and they got buffed too in a little way. So they went from 2-inch range to 1-inch range, which makes them not as like good to reinforce because you won't be able to get all of your guys in. But if you still have a unit of 20, you probably can get most of the attacks in because they're a 25mm base, and that lets you get 2 ranks fighting in. So you could have like 2x10 formation, push them up, and still fight with all of them. So I think that's fine. They got buffed and they got +1 to hit. Skaven used to have an allegiance ability, or I guess they still do now. We don't know if that's. They currently have an allegiance ability that's +1 to hit if you're a unit of 20 or more, and then +1 to wound if you're a unit of 30 or more. That's going to be pretty easy to remove on a unit of 30 and a unit of 20, respectively. So the fact that the +1 to hit's baked in here seems pretty good to me, and they could still have that. So if you still have like a unit of 30 and you get the charge off, they could be 2s and 2s, but don't count on that. They have the same standard bearer and musician as the Clanrats, which is the fallback and charge and add 2 to run. You're probably going to be charging with these a little more, so the 2 to run is not as good, but still very good because mobility wins games. And they have a new special rule called Elite Bodyguards, which is basically a 4-up bodyguard for all of your heroes. And if it's a Verminous, it's on a 2-up instead. So they take the wound, and it's worded the same way as the Nighthaunt one. So neither unit will be able to get their ward save, but that's fine. Like Bodyguard is very powerful, especially in a very prominent shooting meta, so that these guys can take hits for your actual like combat pieces. And you do have like good heroes that you want to protect, especially in like Scryer, which buff your shooting, and your priests and your wizards. Yeah, I think that's a very powerful rule. And I think these units both have a purpose in this army, and you're going to be able to build many lists with both of them. And overall, very good changes. I'm excited to play with the new book. Excited to play with these. Yeah, this is awesome. Race here on the Screaming Bell. Let's go over this. I didn't notice until right now, actually. Their wounds went up by, I think, 2? Maybe 1? But that's something. Save is the same, bravery is the same, moves the same. Same degrading, but that table's a little different. So the Warpstone Staff, that's the same. Terran Claws and Fangs, that's the same. Rusty Spikes, used to be D6 attacks, 2d6 on the charge, now it's 6 degrading to 3. And then the Avalanche of Energy is a new rule, which looks like +2 to casting, +1 to chanting, degrading. That's pretty good, actually. Let's see what else changed. The unit can attempt to cast 1 spell in your hero phase and attempt to unbind. Okay, so they used to be able to 2 cast. I imagine the other Graciers are going down to 1 cast too. But that's fine. And honestly, +2 to cast is 1 spell is much better than 2 spells with no bonus. Mostly because you're probably going to want to get off Mist Shield easier. This is going to be cast on the 3. And then Skaven actually had some very strong allegiance spells, or lore spells as they're actually called. And so being able to get those more reliably is good. And in addition, you used to have a ton of wizards, and you would run out of spells that you would even want to do when you had like 3 or 4 2-cast wizards in your army. So I'd rather have the bonus personally. And if the terrain piece stays the same too, where you get +1 to cast, this is a +3 to cast. Like that's very strong. What else do we got? Got the mount rules? Okay, that's the crew. The ogre. Alright. Pushed into battle. So they can't move unless it's within 6 inches of 10 or more. Okay, that's the same. So you need a unit of 10 or more to actually move this guy. Which is hilarious, but it can be frustrating if they wipe out your unit. Altar of the Horned Rat has a 5-up board. In addition. Okay, yeah, in addition's new. Starting your hero phase, you can say that this will beseech the Horned Rat instead of attempting to cast a spell in that phase. If you do in that phase, this unit is treated as having a priest keyword. Oh, okay, cool. So you can cast or you can pray with this. That's really, I love that rule. That's really cool. Oh, I wonder too if they get like a lore. Like, not a lore, a spell lore and then a prayer list. I guess they're scriptures, I would call them. Yeah, they probably get a scripture. And I wonder if you can, like, pick the enhancement for the prayer on them, even though they're not natively a priest. That's cool. Even if they don't, like, you just switch to a priest and you put bless on something, 6-up board, that's cool. Yeah, Avalanche of Energy. You have the casting value. Okay, yeah, I was right about that. Stirring Beyond the Veil. Once per battle at the start of your hero phase, if 7 or more wounds are allocated to this unit, you can say that the Gracier will shatter the Screaming Bell. If you do so, roll dice on a 1 and this unit's destroyed. Okay, so a 1 in 6 chance it fails. Ugh. On any other roll, add the number of wounds allocated to this unit to the roll. The modified roll is 12 or less. The Screaming Bell is shattered. Oh, okay, cool. The Screaming Bell is shattered. If the modified roll is 13 or more, the Screaming Bell is shattered and you can summon 1 Vermin Lord and add it to your army. Must be set up wholly within 13 of this unit. It can be set up within 3 inches of an enemy unit if this unit is within 3 inches of the enemy unit. Otherwise, must be set up more than 9. If it's shattered, it can't cast Crack's Call, and it can no longer use its Peal of Doom ability. But it's still a wizard with pluses to... That's interesting. Okay, so add a d6 So if it's taken 12 damage, you automatically get this. Man, what's missing here is like a chart that I could make of the chances to get it based on your wound profile. So if you roll a 6, you need to have taken 7 damage, and that's a 16% chance. If you've taken 6 damage, it's a 33. If you've taken 5 damage, it's a 50% chance. Or if you have 5 wounds left, rather, and if you have 6 wounds left, irrespectively. Okay, so it's a pretty decent chance to get that. It's actually much higher than it was before, which was roll a 12 on the Peel of Doom, so a 1 in 36 chance. Yeah, this is much stronger. I really like that. Let's see what the spell does, and let's see if the Peel of Doom does, and see if you're even that concerned about losing those abilities. Crack's Call. So it has a range of 13 and casting value of 6. It used to be 26. Okay. Pick enemy unit within range and visible to the caster. Roll 2d6. If the roll is greater than the unit's move characteristic, it suffers a number of mortal wounds equal to the difference. Okay, so that's the same, and it can't affect flying. So, there's some armies this is great against, and some armies this is obviously terrible against. If you're, fighting, like the Gossamid archers with their 12-inch move, you can't damage them. But if you're, like, hitting their chaff and their Kurnoths, you're probably doing on average, like, 2.5 on a 5 move. Yeah, it's okay. It's pretty... You'd probably be doing a buff spell anyway instead of this, but it's a nice option to have. Let's see, Peel of Doom. Okay, so you roll a d6 instead of 2d6. So they must have cleaned this up a little bit. So Magical Backlash. Unit suffers d3 mortal wounds and can't be negated. Okay, that used to be a 1 in 36 too. So that's way more likely to happen, which kind of sucks, but I'll take the easier summoning and the more consistent damage on the Rusty Spikes. And the pluses to cast is actually huge. Yeah. Okay. And then on a 2, you get 6 inches to your move. Okay. So on a 2-up, it gets to move 12. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. 3. Until your next hero phase, subtract 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by enemy units that are within 13 inches of any friendly screaming bells. Of any friendly... Okay, so if you have multiple... Okay, alright, that's interesting. So if you have multiple, it looks like you can still roll on both of them. And then if you get this one, it's a +1 from all of your Screaming Bells. That's kind of cool. I don't know if this is worth taking multiple of at its points cost, but we'll see what the Allegiance gives it. But that's a cool thing to keep in mind. Until your next hero phase, alright, sorry, on a 4-up with Deafening Peals, on your next hero phase, roll a dice each time an enemy model is picked to issue a command. Well, it's within 13 inches of this. Or of any friendly Screaming Bells, for which you rolled this result in this phase. On a 5-up, that command cannot be issued. Oh, okay, so on a 4, you get Lady O's special command ability, Deny. So it's a weaker Roar, but it's similar to Roar, which is one of the stronger abilities in this game. So that's good. The problem with this ability is that none of these are consistent and you can't plan on any of them. But I guess in the end, it doesn't super matter because you're bringing it for the consistent caster and the chance of the free Vermin Lord and the decent profile. Alright, what's next? On a 5, Screaming Crescendo. Screaming Crescendo. Ugh. Crescendo. There we go. Until next hero phase, after this unit makes a charge move, you can pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of this unit and roll a dice. On a 2-up, that enemy suffers d6 mortal wounds. That's decent damage. I don't know. You already have to roll a 5-up. It should just fucking work, but... What do I know? Apocalyptic Doom. At the end of this hero phase, roll a dice for each enemy unit that's within 13 inches. Any Screaming Bell for which you rolled this result in this phase. Okay. Actually, did I reread all those old ones wrong? So... Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by enemy units that are within 13 inches. Which rolled this result. Okay. So, undo everything I said about them stacking weirdly. That's not right anymore. That would have been cool, but it didn't make sense either. Anyway. So, within 13 that made this roll. On a 4-up, that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. Honestly, yeah, the Peel of Doom is pretty weak now. I guess it always wasn't that strong, and you just can't rely on it to do what you need it to do. And yeah, the damage things don't seem that great. They're okay. Actually, Screaming Crescendo I like a lot more than Apocalyptic Doom. And Deafening Peals, yeah, yeah, you just can't count on these. But that would actually be really cool if there's a heroic action in the book that just let you pick one of these instead of rolling for it. That would actually make this way better. I hope they have something like that. That's just yeah, I pulled that one out of my ass, but that would be really cool. All right, let's talk about the last War Scroll, the Deathmaster. So he went up 70 points. His profile is the same. His range attacks, he got one more. And they used to be 4's 5 1 damage. Now there's 4's 4's D3 damage. So that's an upgrade, but still not a stellar profile. And he got 2 more attacks with his sword, but he lost 7 of 1 damage with his little tail. And it's a cleaner profile, that's fine. I like that better anyway. Hidden Hunters. So when you select this unit to be part of your army, when you select this unit to be part of your army, you can pick one Clanrat or Stormvermin unit on your army roster to be the unit in which this unit is hiding. Record it separately on a piece of paper. Do not set this unit up until it is revealed as described next. You cannot hide more than one Deathmaster in the same Clanrats or Stormvermin unit. At the start of the combat phase, if this unit is hidden, you can reveal it. In addition, if the unit in which this unit is hidden is destroyed, you must reveal this unit before the last model in the unit is removed from play. When you reveal this unit, set it up wholly within 3 inches of this unit in which it has been hidden. And if it was revealed in a unit that was destroyed, it suffers 1 mortal wound after setup. So if it was destroyed in melee, you can set this up in combat. That's new. I don't think you were able to save it from being destroyed in melee. Also, though, it used to be able to put within any unit of 10 or more models. And now it specifies Clanrats and Stormvermin, which, put the tinfoil hat on here. I'm pretty sure that means that we're probably losing gutter runners and night runners. Because it would make sense if they limited it to the gutter runners and night runners, but they're not. It specifically calls out not them. I mean, those models sucked ass anyway, so I'm fine with that. But yeah, that's probably sad for people who really like the Eshin stuff. They should have just resculpted those instead of him, to be honest. The Deathmaster was fine. This is way better, though, so I'm happy to have the newer model. But yeah, that's an interesting thing to note. But I think the rule is a little bit better because it has a safety clause. So the Deathmaster, before and now, was clearly meant to be like a tech piece to hide in a unit that you would go and snipe other smaller like foot heroes with. But before, he never really had the damage, and what usually would happen, he would run, he would hit an enemy unit, and then be turned into a fine paste of blood before he would be able to do any real damage. But now, like, he does a lot of mortal wound. Well, not a lot, but probably around 3 or 5 in a turn. And he does okay damage with his weapon. So he's probably going to be able to kill small foot heroes that are left in the open. So having one of these inside your army will always keep your opponent on their toes and not play risky with any of their heroes or leave them out in the open. But I think ultimately 170 points is a huge ask for something like that. Maybe there'll be a relic that this guy can take that will make it much less of an ask. Or like I guess even with the Vial of Manticore Venom, 3's 2's, or like 2's 2's if you give him the all-out attack. I don't like that though. I think you'd rather have another relic in your army. Yeah. Yeah, he's gonna be a tough one to fit, but I think when the book comes out there might be different allegiance abilities. I think his damage is like a touch too low for his 170. At 140, I think he'd be a serious consideration. Maybe that's a little too low even, but I'm not. He'll be fun. He'll do stuff in games when you take him, and like he's definitely enough of a mind game to have an impact on the game. Heck, yeah, maybe 170 is fine for him in that case. All right, and that was it for the War Scrolls. Overall, pretty positive changes. I'm excited to see these models in person. Excited to play with them. I really want to know what the Lady of Vines does, because she was a really cool character in the Realm Gate Wars. But overall, hopefully next week I'll be able to stream again with Bill if he's not sick anymore. But in the meantime, thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you later.